Good morning, everyone. I will call to order the Marin Watershed and Special Board Meeting of March 20th, 2025. Terry, could we have roll call, please?
Good morning. Director Diana Mayer.
Present.
Director Larry Russell.
Here.
Director Jed Smith.
Here.
Vice Chair Matt Sampson.
Here.
Chair Ranjiv Kush.
Here.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to adopt today's agenda?
So moved.
Terry, are there any public comments on today's agenda?
Not on the agenda. Someone second that?
Second.
Okay, great. Could we have a roll call vote then to adopt the agenda?
Director Mayer.
Aye.
Director Russell.
Aye.
Director Smith.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sampson.
Yes.
Chair Kush.
Aye.
Thank you.
Next item is public comments on items that are not on the agenda.
Yes, I believe there are two, Vernon Huffman and Phil Sauter.
Good morning. Vernon Huffman with Access for Bikes. And my comment is related to the ongoing mediation process regarding the litigation on the pilot trail process. Knowing you can't comment on that, I do have some comments to offer. I just wanted to give you a few stats to keep in mind while you're in mediation. In the California state parks, bikes have access to 27.7 miles of trail, or 35% of the trail system. In the National Park Service, bikes have access to 28.8 miles of trail, single track trail, or 41% of the trail system. In the Marin County parks, bikes have access to 22.2 miles, or 35% of the trail system. All of this is happening without harm to the environment, to flora or fauna. Access for Bikes works with these organizations to voluntarily work on trail crews. We bring our skilled set of labor to make sure these trails are sustainable. I would like to point out that in the Marin Municipal Water District, 0 trails are accessible to bikes, or 0% are accessible to bikes. We have a long way to go, and the sooner we get through this mediation, the better, because there's an unmet need. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Phil Sauter, please.
Good morning. Thursday is our broom pulling day in the Valley, and I'll miss most of the presentations this morning, but I did have a chance to review them online. I'm so grateful to staff and to the board for the attention to our watershed, not only as a source of 75% of our potable water, but as a habitat for many other species who count on this watershed for survival. There may be other water districts who work at the trail, log, and gravel level to measure and improve the health of their watersheds, but I doubt there are many. I wanted to express my sincere thanks to the district for showing respect for our watershed and investing to ensure its health. As we move towards increasing our reliance on Sonoma water from 25% currently to 30% or more in the future, I think we'll need to show more interest in that watershed as well as our own. Sonoma water won't just be used on lawns. Our kitchen taps will have a mix of water from both watersheds. For over a century, we've been remarkably fortunate to have had almost total control over the quality and sustainability of our drinking water supply. But unless we can reduce our summer use of potable water outdoors, we'll be reliant on 2 watersheds, Sonoma's and our own. I'm not sure what greater involvement with the Russian River watershed would look like, or even if we'll be given a seat at the table. Hopefully, after learning more about what Marin Water has been able to accomplish in our own watershed, Sonoma Water will be glad to welcome our input on ways to improve the health and sustainability of their watershed and all the species that rely on it. I'll sure be looking for ways to share lessons learned, and I hope others will too. Thank you.
Thank you. And one more speaker, Andy Levine, please.
Hello, hopefully you can all hear me. I'd just like to say, similar to what Vernon Huffman said, we see a lot of things going on in other trails around the area, and I look forward to hopefully some good things happening with the pilot trails. It's great to see Liberty Gulch finally coming through. And if you look around at sister agencies in the area, you got state parks now moving forward with the change of use on easy grade. You have, San Anselmo with Storage Park opening up more trails for bikes, more access for bikes. Similarly, Eagle Rock by county parks, all the agencies are going through the same thing that you're going through and dealing with this similar small vocal resistance to it. But in the end, these projects are going through. So I really appreciate your efforts to stay the course and finish that great public process that led to all those pilot trails and all the input that made that a good public benefit that we're all waiting for and looking forward to. And it's very similar thing just happened in the East Bay. Briones up there, those parks, they had pilot trails, mountain bike specific pilot trails. Everything went well, and they have now made those trails permanent. So I look forward to the days when that happens here, and very much appreciate all your efforts on keeping access for everyone going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Chair Kush.
Yes.
If I may just take a moment to point something out briefly in the agenda package for our Watershed Committee today. Just a change that the directors may have noted to our staff reports. We now have, instead of review and refer, we have action and we have review and comment. And so this is a streamlining that staff is implementing and did so also with the Finance and Administration Committee, just so that there is kind of uniformity, clarity, and no confusion for the board or the public in how we're treating items that come to committee. So we're no longer going to be asking for review and refer. It's review and comment. Of course, we want to hear comments from all the board members who are present at either of simply the committee meetings or the duly noticed meetings. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear on that before we started. Thanks.
Got it. Thanks, Molly.
Roger, guys, quick, so that
Yeah.
just to confirm, there's not a motion at that point with these then?
Correct. I mean, we did have, under the review and refer, it was a motion and a second. We didn't have recommendation because obviously if the whole board is here, that would be tantamount to an approval. So in thinking about how are we going to move forward now that we have committee meetings as well as committee plus special board meetings for dual noticing, how did we want to kind of streamline and shift the presentation of those items and the consideration of those items by the committee and the special board meeting. And so that's what we came up with, and happy to discuss, or if there's any questions, I just wanted to point that out.
No, I noted that, but I think that makes sense. Thank you. Okay, we'll move then to our regular agenda, starting with item 4A, which is approval of our Watershed Committee and Special Board meeting minutes from December 19th, 2024. These are included in our meeting packet. Terry, are there any public comments on our previous meeting minutes?
Yes, Vernon Huffman.
That was for a non-agenda.
Yeah, but you said A and B. This is A.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, no worries. And I have no speakers.
Okay.
Yeah, I move to approve the minutes.
we have a
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please, Terry.
No problem. Director Mayer,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sampson.
Yes.
Chair Kush.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to item 4B, we have an information item on proposed revisions to the Azalea Hill Trail restoration work. Welcome, Sean.
Yeah. Morning, committee members.
Colleagues.
Sean Horn, Director of Watershed Resources, and I'm joined with Tanya Trice from Panorama Consulting and Carl Sanders, our Natural Resource Program Manager. We have a presentation for you this morning that we're going to provide an update on the Azalea Hill Trail Restoration Project, and this is a review item to approve CEQA addendum for the project. So we provided a detailed update at the December 19th Watershed Committee meeting about the construction work that's been going on the Azalea Hill Trail Restoration Project over the last couple of years. At that meeting, we identified the need to do a minor revision to the project based on some of the existing conditions and the work that we've been proceeding with. So that's what we're going to provide an update on this morning. So we have a presentation, an overview of the project, just to remind us all of what we're implementing out here, and talk about recently completed work in the various phases, the environmental compliance, which is an addendum to the ISM&D document, and then talk about next steps to complete the entire project. So as a reminder, the board certified the ISM&D in May of 2019 for this project. It includes 3 phases. The project elements include a 4.4 mile decommissioning, and that's in the hatched area of that map primarily. And then there was also the adoption and improvement of 1.9 miles of a multi-use class 4 trail, which is phase 2 and 3 on this map. And then there was a 1.1 mile improvement of a hiking and equestrian trail, which is phase 1. And then there was treatment and improvement of some erosion issues at the parking lot along Bolinas Fairfax Road. And so that's a final element of the project. The project was really developed with a light on the land approach, and that's what the original ISM&D really highlighted, is that we had an existing road cut on the Liberty Gulch segment, which is phase 3 of this project, that we could build off of. And there was also a social trail, which is phase 2, which was known as the old Fisherman's Trail, that took you to Alpine Lake. And these became kind of the foundational components of that multi-use segment of the project. The project has been implemented through volunteer activities with partners in the community, as well as a number of grants that we've gotten, one through State Parks Regional Trail Program, recreational trails program, for $940,000 to support phase 3 of the project. And we also got a grant from the California Conservation Corps North Bay for their crews to support the district in implementing the project. And that was for about $200,000. So we've gotten a lot of support for implementing this project, and we've made some really good progress over the last couple of years to implement it. What we want to highlight are some of the changes that we've identified for this project that are really in the spirit of being light on the land and really reducing the potential footprint of the project while still achieving the objectives and supporting the goals that the district had. So before I get started in what those changes are, I'm going to hand it to Tanya to provide us kind of just an overview of the addendum process and why that's appropriate here.
Hi, I'm Tanya Trice with Panorama Environmental, and I worked on the addendum for this project. The addendum process included first looking at what the changes would be, which includes a segment of the trail not being widened. It's about 288 feet, and the reasons for that is because there are a lot of rare plants in that area. Not widening through this one small section would reduce the impacts to those plants. And the addendum included defining what that would look like and protection measures that would be associated with that section in order to reduce off-trail use and safety for bikes that move through this area. As part of the addendum process, we looked at each of the parameters, environmental parameters in the ISM&D. And we look to see if there's any new impacts or greater impacts per CEQA section 15162. It's like 2 or 3, 62. And what we found was that there weren't any new impacts. If anything, there were actually reduced impacts from this modification. The modification also included not implementing all of the stream crossings to the degree that was identified. Again, that was a provision for light on the land. The crossings were evaluated by MMWD staff and determined hydrologically they would be okay with less work. If there were problems down the road, the ISM&D does include, need for monitoring and for, remediation if you do see issues. So no greater impacts were expected. And so an addendum was the appropriate documentation because we could show that there weren't any new or greater impacts from these minor changes.
Thank you. So with that, we'll go over some of the minor changes just so you fully understand what we're talking about. The map in front of you identifies 6 sites in pink. Those 6 sites are sites that we thought a smaller improvement could be made in order to achieve the same goal. And there are some limitations that we've had throughout this entire project as we implemented it to get equipment and material out to these sites. So we've been building a lot of bridges And in these remote locations, all of the cement is brought in 50-gallon bags, hiked out to the sites. The footings are poured on site. We're pumping water in and mixing the concrete on site. So it's an incredible endeavor to do these projects. And so making some of these revisions is also in the interest of some efficiency and limiting our need to access these sites and bring equipment through these sensitive zones. So Site 7 was originally scoped as a bridge, a 20-foot bridge above the creek, small creek. We've identified this as a no bridge being installed at this site, and we wanted to do this because it avoids rare plants in the areas and it doesn't require us to bring equipment into that site. We think that some minor armoring will achieve the intended purpose here. Site 8 had originally identified some armoring of the wet crossing. We've just downscaled the scope of that armoring to just placement of some large rocks to get over this small crossing. Site 11 was this is an existing culvert, and we're intending to slip line this culvert, but the culvert is currently functioning and in good condition. And so to get the slip lining material out to the site was more significant than was really necessary. So we're just saying we're going to leave this as is and monitor it over time. Should improvements be needed in the future, like all of our culverts on the watershed, we'll take that project on. Site 16 was armoring of a wet crossing. We're not proposing to do any work at this site. It is functioning as intended currently. 22 was a causeway, which is kind of like a large wood structure, kind of like what we have in Sky Oaks Meadow that we are proposing here. We've done some trail improvements to address water on the trail and the hydrological connectivity through that section, and we think that's appropriate in meeting the intended needs, so no causeway there. Site 25 was going to be an armored crossing, and this is an interesting site where there's an existing culvert that's been plugged, and to remove that culvert is actually going to have a larger disturbance footprint, and there are some sensitive plants in the area. So at the direction of our botanist, we decided that we would leave that in place and kind of crush it and then put the rock on top of it and leave it as a rock crossing in that way. So all of these adjustments are really smaller than originally proposed in the initial project. The other section that Tanya mentioned was a trail narrowing section. And so this is unique and not an ideal solution, but really us working with the land and modifying the project based on existing conditions. And so what I'll focus your attention on the map is the red line. You can kind of ignore the blue line here. The red line is the existing trail, and this was a social trail prior to the project beginning. So there was
Sean, just real quickly, can you orientate us on whereabouts that is on the bigger map?
so that's north side. Let me go. That's Alpine Lake to your left.
I know
And
that's fine.
what we're looking at is between Site 7 and 8 on the map. And so we have a bridge at Site 9 currently. Site 8 was scoped as an improvement. What you see here is a grassland area with some rare sensitive plants in it. We did not feel that we could meet the 4-foot width of the trail without having an impact that was going to be difficult to mitigate. And so that was our intention was, can we keep this as a narrow section of trail? And to mitigate that, we would put signage on each side to tell people to go 5 miles an hour on a bicycle, to yield to other visitors, keep it to one person or single file, traffic on that trail. We'll have signs that ask people not to step off of the trail. And this is on a slope, so I don't think that we're going to see a lot of people trying to step off and resulting in a widening here. I think people are going to use it as they have historically been using it. And we will not have ATVs or UTV access through this section. So that's just an operational component that our rangers will have to understand, that we approach this trail either from Bolinas Fairfax Road or from Sky Oaks, and it's an out and back type of action there. We would update our watershed map to identify this as a trail narrowing section. So if people are hiking it, they know that that's going to be something that they encounter along this trail. And then our project does allow us to widen it. It just has mitigation measures in it. So what we are saying is that we will monitor this segment of trail to see if there is any impact to the sensitive plants within this section. And if there are, we'll mitigate those per our existing document. And so we feel like this is a much reduced impact for the overall project. And we feel that our visitors will be able to accommodate this kind of modification appropriately. So that's the crux of the addendum. What we wanted to highlight is kind of next steps, and then we'll take questions from you. We are intending to have a volunteer appreciation event on May 3rd. We're thinking this is kind of a get coffee in the morning and go explore the trail kind of event. So maybe for an hour at the Lake Lagunitas picnic area, invite volunteers who have worked and supported the project being implemented, provide our thanks to them, and then support their kind of activity on the watershed that day. And then we are thinking that this addendum would be approved in April by the board if it's brought forward. And that would allow us to open the trail, the multi-use segment of the trail in May. We would be then progressing to design our parking lot improvements. So we're kind of scoping that. What does it take to address the erosion issues out there, and what do we want that trailhead facility to look like? So that'd be the next phase of the project that we'd be implementing. We'll continue our rare plant surveys through the entire project, but specifically to support construction through phase 1, so that this summer and into the fall and winter, we would be continuing to improve the hiking and equestrian route that goes up and over Azalea Hill. And then we'll have ongoing volunteer days to support that hiking trail segment. We anticipate completing the trail improvement work by 2026. So that'd be the phase 1 trail improvements. The parking lot may go a little longer in terms of what we design and how we fund and implement that. But we're making good progress on the entire project, and we're hopeful that this trail narrowing and modification of the project is something that we can move forward with and, open the project in May. So with that, we'll take any questions that you might have on the project.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Tanya. Opening up for board discussion. Diana, do you want to kick us off?
I don't have any questions. Thanks.
Matt?
Sean and team, first off, thank you for including the CEQA doc or environmental document through Panorama in the packet. I think it's very helpful and a good reminder of how much work that goes into just a small 288-foot section on this piece. So I appreciate the reminder on that. And also, I also appreciate the perspective and the approach you took in terms of looking to be flexible and actually looking at alternatives that might actually be less impactful and then actually reduces your workload. So thank you very much for this, and very much looking forward to May 1st.
Thanks, Matt. Jed?
Yeah, thank you for showing your concern for the environment and native species and rare plants. So I appreciate all of that work, and hopefully our environmental community will appreciate everything that we're doing to be thoughtful here. And the biking community will understand how important it is that we care for these trails. I know that trail, I know exactly that spot, that social spot, and I've always wondered why it was almost not marked, because it's so clearly cut through in a way. Are there any other ways to get around it besides making that social trail more clearly designated? Is there any higher route, or is that even cut worse into it?
Yeah, we definitely looked at different alternatives and scouted that to the extent that we could. It is on a slope, so it made it really difficult to get up and around that grassland, and that grassland is fairly large.
Yep.
And so we didn't see another way without having a larger impact, and then connecting to the other bridge.
I'm sure you thought it
facilities.
through, but okay. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Jed. Larry?
Just nice to see it moving forward. It's amazing. It's 2019 since we took action on it, but good to see you moving forward. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree with that. It'll be great to finally open it up, Liberty Gulch, and have the Volunteer Appreciation Day. Sean, with the adoption of the addendum, does it mean that phases 2 and 3 are fully completed? You noted that phase 1 still needs some work.
Yeah, so that would be the action the board would take, would be adopting the addendum. We would install the signage for that 288-foot section, and that would conclude the project for implementation of the phase 1 and 2 with an opening date for that segment in May.
Okay. And, it's encouraging to see that, these types of modifications to the original CEQA can be put through with an addendum that seems fairly straightforward and efficient through the whole process. And, you've noted various changes that are captured in the addendum to improve the environmental outcomes associated with this project. Are there any learnings from this, 6-year program that will be helpful for other efforts to both improve trail access at the same time reducing the impact of social trails, unmanaged trails, as is being done with Azalea Hill.
Yeah, I think two things to consider would be the, benefit of Azalea Hill is that we're removing 4.4 miles of social trail while opening up 2 miles of multi-use and hiking and equestrian. So balancing that closure of social trail with that access is, something that we've learned from this is a important component. And the other one I would note would be thinking about our trail classification system. And we currently have multi-use as a class 4, which is a 4-foot wide trail. And that's a pretty significant trail to build. So, right, this is 1.9 miles that we've been building since 2019. We have a grant of $940,000 for that. And we've, it's a large footprint. And so we might want to think about, is it easier to have a smaller trail footprint for either separate use or multi-use?
That's an interesting comment. That I'm sure we're going to come back to that in future watershed committee meetings, board meetings, and it may be related to updates to the full road and trail management plan, I'm guessing.
I
Not-
have a question.
not giving
What is
anything
the
away.
basis of the 4 feet? Why?
2005 Roads and Trails Plan identified that it was mostly, I believe, for kind of access with UTVs and 4-wheel drive for ranger
So district
support.
stuff.
Yeah, and safety, thinking about if you have a horse equestrian or an equestrian and a cyclist on a trail, does that make sense?
Not so sure a horse would appreciate a bicycle that close, but maybe.
All right, so Molly, in this case, but first, I won't forget public comments. So.
Yes, we have a few. Vernon Huffman and Larry Minikis, please.
Well, thank you. I can't wait to update those statistics I named off earlier. I'm about to add 1.9 miles of multi-use trail that we now enjoy in the watershed. So really exciting. It's taken quite a while. Larry pointed out since 2019. Had we known we were going to keep that trail standard in the middle of the trail, not usable to UTVs, we could have built smaller bridges. We could have accelerated this project. So that's hope. That's a learning opportunity. That's definitely keeping that in mind moving forward on other trail projects. And then regarding the road and trails management plan, yes, we dearly need a new category for hike bike trail or hike only or bike only trail, because we could throughout other. Just for example, Tamarancho, where we have bike and hike trail, we use about a 24-inch trail width there. So the impact is pretty light on nature there. We can hand dig it, and we prefer to hand dig because those trails are funner to ride. So with our volunteers that we bring out, we can get 25, 30, 40 people to a trail day, and we can hand dig that. So 24 inches is a really good standard. I look forward to the updates to the RTMP. Thank you. Really exciting.
Yeah, I'm Larry Minikis, and good morning. And I think the project highlights the complexities of doing a trail project when you have 2 miles, and within that 2 miles, you have 25 stream crossings. It just speaks to the sensitivity of these lands and how carefully we have to approach them. And I'd like to point out that there was an article in the Chronicle from 1996 talking about this trail project being already old hat. It had been going on for years. And so it just shows sometimes how long these projects take. And I think actually the most exciting part of this project, or one of the most exciting parts, is the decommissioning of the 4.4 miles of social trails. There's some real sensitive areas down there, and that is very much welcome. So with that, congratulations, and looking forward to this project going to full fruition. Thank you so much.
Next, we have Nona Dennis.
Hi, thank you. I want to commend the staff for carrying out this really very important and sensitive project. We've been tracking it for many years. We followed the amendment to the Road and Trail Management Plan that made this possible. During that process, it was never referred to as a trail, but as a route, because it was considered to be an all-purpose utility route. And we were very aware of the proximity of rare plants, particularly in that segment that you were working on and narrowing. I recall walking on that one and realized that it was threading its way. We hoped it would thread its way through what looked like in quotes, a grassland, but in fact was full of sensitive species. So I think that probably that segment will work because the line of sight is good there also. So conflicts can be avoided. The signs will help also. But I think that the lesson to be learned here is that it takes time, and it takes really careful review of trails in order to determine that they are fully protected from a considerable increase in use, considerable increase. So, well, thank you very much for doing the work that you've done on this trail. Unfortunately, my mobility will no longer allow me probably to test it, but I think that others certainly will enjoy it. And thank you very much for Sean and Carl and others for doing such a careful job. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Tom, please.
Yeah, good morning, directors. I just wanted to point out that this project, and you might have called it out, it actually goes back to 2011, or the concept probably even before then, but it was myself and Nona Dennis, the late Roger Roberts, and Mike Swayze, all standing on top of that beautiful hill with that amazing view, trying to figure out how we could thread the needle. And it took a long time, but we learned a lot through this process. And I'm just so excited that it's finally moving forward and achieving lots of multiple enhancements, including connectivity, recreation, and restoration of that hillside. And so anyway, very excited that we've gotten to this point, and look forward to the opening. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
All right, thanks, Terry. And so Molly, now in this case, we are, as you've noted, not making a referral for
Correct.
adoption.
There's no other action necessary other than just any comments from directors.
Okay, then I think we're good with this item. We'll move on to agenda item 4C, which is review of the Lagunitas Creek Enhancement Project Phase 1B construction plans, which will be put out to bid and award approval at a regularly scheduled board meeting, presumably in late May.
Mm.
So for this item, I'm going to be joined with Jonathan Kaler, our fisheries manager, and we're going to talk you through the Lagunitas Creek enhancement project and the next phase in front of us. So as was mentioned, this is a review item to support the bid process to advertise this project for award, and we'd be bringing it back with a recommendation for the lowest qualified bidder to move forward with construction of phase 1B. To provide a little bit of context and an overview of this project, you'll recall that we have 3 phases. We have phase 1A, 1B, and phase 2. In total, we have 13 sites. Phase 1A was implemented this last summer. That was sites 6, 5, and 4. And we completed that with the support of Hanford ARC Construction and our design consultant ESA. We have phase 1B that we'd like to bring forward and advertise for bids to support construction this summer. And so we'll provide a bit of an overview of what that looks like and the project. So with that, I'm going to hand it to Jonathan to talk us through it.
Good morning, directors. Good to be with you. So you've been getting regular updates on this project. I won't rehash too much, but yeah, we're really excited about the implementation of the project last summer. Excuse me. It went well. The structures are performing well. We had a real test this winter. The storm flows we saw in February were the highest that Lagunitas Creek has seen since 2005. So 20 years, big flows. For those of you who think about creeks in terms of flow volumes. It was right around 6,000 cubic feet per second. So a lot of water came down the creek. The structures handled it well. A lot of the smaller material did kind of what we expected, which is mobilize and redistribute, and nature did what nature does. But overall, structurally, the project looks great. And we're really excited about implementing this same approach downstream and continuing it. So what you're looking at here are two of the primary features: the riffle forcing log structure, which is two large logs that sort of almost span the full channel. They have a narrow opening in the middle, and they create a deeper pool upstream. They create a spawning site right at the structure there, and then they force water and create fast sort of moving water. So that complexity is really what we're trying to create for coho salmon, steelhead, freshwater shrimp. And then these structures on the right, you can kind of see, it's tough to see with at the scale of this photo, but looking upstream, it's these log boulder sort of hideouts for fingerlings and the young fish, and then couple that with these riffle structures sort of in very close proximity. So overall, we're pleased with the way the project's performing, and yeah, good news. So phase 1B, those next 5 sites that Sean mentioned, we have an estimate total cost of about $2.93 million, right in that range. Again, there's a competitive bid process, so we don't know what the actual construction bids are going to come in at. And we have 3 grants funding this work next year. The CDFW grant there, that's what entirely funded last year's work. And so we're using the remaining chunk to co-fund sites 1 through 3 with this Bureau of Reclamation grant. And as you are aware, there's a current freeze on federal grants right now. So we're confirming the status of this grant with our USBR contacts. And we just want to make sure that obviously these grants work in a reimbursement sort of arrangement. And so we want to make sure if we construct the project, we will be reimbursed. The great news is we've explained the situation to DWR, one of our other funding partners here, and they have quite amazingly, I will say, in very short order, recommended we apply for an amendment. So we've done that. We actually applied yesterday to pick up this $1.4 million addition, and they've indicated that they do have the funding available. They're really supportive of the project. So the idea is that we'll request this money from DWR, and should that USBR money become available, or if it actually is there, and we can't test it yet, we would be able to apply that to the phase 2 sites downstream. So give us maximum sort of operational flexibility. So this just really highlights the importance of a diverse portfolio, I think, as we all recognize, but we are moving forward with that. So this next year's phase is, it's a little different than what we've done last year, and it's certainly different than what the district has done historically, because it includes this large addition of gravel. So we mentioned that, that the creek needs 2 primary inputs in terms of what the dam is holding back, and that's spawning gravel and wood, and they work in conjunction to create good habitat like this that you see. And the idea is that if you continually feed the stream this spawning gravel, sort of acts like a conveyor belt, that not only does it create complex habitat for our new structures, but it also actually enhances, you can see some of these older structures. The district's been doing this for decades, and this gravel addition is actually benefiting stuff that the district has implemented for a long time. So we immediately see this year we've seen these development of these large gravel bars. That's the kind of stuff that, to a fish biologist, to a stream person, we really we love to see. So again, really encouraging. The approach seems to be working. And then scientifically, we've mentioned this. There's a lot of monitoring involved in this project. So one fairly unique aspect of that is drilling holes in some of the spawning gravels that we're installing, about 300 of them, putting pit tags, these same little transponder tags. I use the analogy, it's like a fast track. It's the same ones we put in fish to track where they go, and placing these at known locations, and then seeing what kind of storm flows mobilize the material and hopefully guide and inform future iterations of the project. So pretty cool scientific aspect of the project, and we're getting going on that this year. So no data yet, but look forward to that. The timeline's been a little different than this, but we are still definitely on track to get this thing going this year. That April 1st date might be pushed back a little bit just because of this funding sort of scramble we're doing. But, you know, overall, I think we're in good shape. We're still ahead of last year's schedule, so I think we're fine. And yeah, hopefully get another 5 sites on the ground in November for another good coho spawning year. You see fish here. It was a record coho year, so we hope to keep this up.
And so maybe we'll just add to close that we have an incredibly short construction window out here because of the northern spotted owl that nest in the region. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to move this through the bid process quickly and get construction going on. And then just to summarize, so the funding that we have for phase 1B, 3 grants, USBR, CDFW, and DWR. USBR 1.4 million, concerned that we might not be reimbursed, but that will be covered by DWR's amendment. Should we be reimbursed by the USBR funding stream, DWR can then be pushed downstream to phase 2 implementation. So incredibly flexible amendment that they're working on with us. And it just speaks to the importance of this stream system and the state's willingness to invest in these types of restoration projects. So with that, we'll take any questions that you might have about this. And then we would be bringing this back to a board meeting for award.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks, Jonathan. Great updates. Board discussion. Larry, do you want to start this time?
Well, it's great to hear we have a design that holds up to the water now. So for those who don't know, they had a failure 5 years ago.
Yeah,
something like that. And it got a little exciting about why the structure moved. So they redesigned it and got it into a shape that now is working, which is great to hear. Congratulations. Thanks.
Jed? Matt?
So just to confirm, this is the design's already done, same design as the other ones. Any idea on how this next phase is going to benefit the first phase that was done? Is there any synergy there?
Yeah, so all of the gravel inputs are upstream, and the idea is that we are just feeding the top of that conveyor belt. So I imagine that a lot of that material will end up in those sites, maybe not in a year, maybe not in 2, but definitely over the next decade, maybe. Yeah, and continue to just improve that habitat downstream.
Very cool.
It's essentially bedrock now in a lot of places, and so we're trying to recreate that lens of gravel that naturally occurs there.
Great. With phase 2, looking forward down the road, I guess the western boundary of phase 2, how close is that to Nicasio Creek?
So phase 2 is down kind of in Samuel P. Taylor State Park's camping area. So
Okay.
we're
It's not through the campsite itself.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And then lastly, just want to encourage, when we start getting data back from the pit tagging of gravel, that'd be really interesting topic to share throughout. We saw last board meeting that there's some microturbine research that might be presented. This one definitely would be up there too. So I would encourage it.
Cool. And Jonathan, maybe you want to just speak to the conferences that fishery staff will be presenting at?
Yeah, so we're definitely trying to get this out in the world. I'll be going to the American Fisheries Society conference in Colorado in May. Got accepted to give a talk on this project. Our fisheries biologist, Eric Ettlinger, is he's actually leading a session on drone monitoring, which is another aspect of this that our district drone pilot was able to fly the site pre and post project, and we're still trying to refine that as a methodology. And then our natural resources technician aide, Sterling Mayhew, who I think you've met, he's going to be giving a poster presentation at the Salmonid Restoration Federation Conference in Santa Cruz. And so, yeah, we're trying to get the word out and really, use this to the maximum possible, in the best way possible.
Thanks. Diana?
Yeah, I just want to say that I took my family on a Turtle Island tour in January to see the spawning, and it was so cool. And we didn't see that much, but the couple places we did see spawning going on, there were wooden structures that the guide pointed out were as a result of this restoration project. So that was really exciting. And I guess they said that the numbers are way, way up. I can't remember, like the highest in 25 years or something. You probably know already. But anyway, I just felt incredibly proud of the work you all are doing, and I really and people know about it. It's people are learning, so that's great. Hopefully, you'll garner more support as well.
Yeah, thanks, Diana. And uh, super encouraging to see the support that may be coming through from DWR. It just is that confirmed, or we're still waiting for the final word?
So we met with DWR to give them an update on this project, and they confirmed they have funding available. They confirmed that amendment would be appropriate. They recommended that we set it up so that it could be flexible for phase 2 to be included. So that was great. We drafted the amendment language and sent that to them. So it hasn't been signed, but it will be signed by the time we bring it back for award.
Okay, so it's looking good. Good news. Terry, do we have any public comments?
Yes, Mr. Larry Minikis, please.
Yes, I just would like to highlight that I was on a January 24th field trip. Director Sampson was there. We went to Roy's Redwoods and then to the Cross Marin Trail. And there was quite a large group of us. I would say maybe 70 folks, something along there showed up. It was incredibly informative and educational. And I want to give you guys props on the work you're doing out there, and would like to suggest that this is really an educational opportunity for schools and such to see firsthand the kind of work. And some of this work is incredibly sophisticated that you see out there. So just really impressive to see what's going on out there. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, we'll move on then to
I have one more quick.
Sorry,
comment.
Larry.
I don't know if everyone follows exactly what's going on here, but the dams cut this off. So that's where the problem starts, is that the natural condition that would occur without the dam is that this gravel would be supplied from nature. But here we have to bring it in because we've stopped that. So,
and logs.
yeah, and the logs too, yeah.
Yeah, no, good point, Larry. Good clarification. Okay, then agenda item 4D, which is review of a $200,000 grant from the Mount Tamalpais Watershed Fund to advance watershed facilities assessment and conceptual plan.
So for this item, we're going to be joined by Claire Mooney from the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy. The watershed facilities assessment and conceptual design is something we're bringing forward to you to discuss, and it's a review item. The concept is that we would make use of the Mount Tam Watershed Fund, and we'll speak to the history of that and what that fund's looking like right now. Talk about some of the Golden Gate National Parks projects where they've supported other public land management agencies in doing similar efforts, and as well as the district. We'll talk about what the scope of this could look like and get any comments that you have regarding that scope, and then talk about next steps for the project. So for the Mount Tam Watershed Fund, it was developed in 1996. It was actually the district leading the way for a friends group and thinking that, you know, that would be beneficial to the watershed in terms of having an opportunity for visitors to support it. That really led to the culmination of the One Tam partnership and the partnership with the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy. And the Mount Tam Fund has since been something that we've used for various watershed stewardship and facilities improvement projects. Over the years, the district has granted about $400,000 from that fund for various projects. The most recent ones included the Bullfrog Bridge over into the Azalea Hill project. So that was kind of our gateway into the Azalea Hill project that was funded out of this Mount Tam Fund. We've also done some conceptual designs for West Peak that were funded through this foundation. And then currently we have a balance of about $782,000. 95% of that comes from one very generous donor on an annual basis. And we've done a good job in the last couple months and years trying to promote this in new ways. So you can get to the Mount Tam Fund through our visitor map now. We're including that in our kiosks through a QR code. And we try to raise awareness around this opportunity for folks periodically. And we think this would be a great use of this fund to take on a watershed facilities assessment and really try to improve some of our facilities. So with that, I'm going to hand it to Claire to kind of talk about some of the things that have been done on the watershed in partnership with the Conservancy and some of the work that they're doing elsewhere as well. Yep.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet, I am Claire Mooney. I serve as the Conservancy's Vice President for Park Projects and Conservation. And in that role, support all of our agency partners, the National Park Service, California State Parks, Marin Water, and Marin County Parks, as well as the Presidio Trust, in scoping, designing, and implementing a range of park and watershed improvement projects. We're going to highlight two we looked at with Marin Water, as well as two we have in the works for at Muirwoods and then at Roy's Redwoods. But I'd say in general, these are projects that really work at the intersection of resource enhancement, both in watershed and park resources, as well as visitor access and enjoyment of these lands, and then a recognition of how we all need to operate, whether that's through volunteers or through staff. So that's a place that I think the Parks Conservancy really shines, is where all those places come together. What you see on the screen are two projects that we explored in kind of the early days of One TAM when we were looking at how best to support our partners. On the left is a very early schematic design done for the Lake Lagunitas area that again recognized opportunities for restoration and improved visitor experience. And then on the right is a more extensive look at opportunities for the restoration of West Peak. And for that effort in particular, I think, again, we really highlighted some more extensive opportunities for restoration, wider trail expansion, as well as great opportunities for just low-hanging fruit, really project-ready actions. And that's something we can continue to do throughout any of these, is look at opportunities for relatively easy, relatively low complexity, low cost project actions, as well as also articulate a fuller vision. And in that, I think we've been really successful in working with our partners to make sure that we can leverage staff capacity, leverage resources, while again, always improving visitor conservation actions. Again, to speak to this, I want to talk to two projects, one we have currently in design and one we've recently completed. So on the lower left, you see the current state of affairs at the Muirwoods entry area. This is a project that the Parks Conservancy has recently initiated design of in support of the National Park Service. This is a place where we really want to look at this as your first arrival to the Muirwoods National Monument. You can't tell if you go left or right. The first thing that you see is the bathroom, which is important for many visitors, but not how we want to welcome folks to the national park. So this is the opportunity to really look at how do we make sure visitors have those critical things they need: restrooms, kiosks, ticketing, clear, engaged, but also do that in a way that's more seamless and that allows for greater restoration and habitat conservation. Part of this effort also looks at best use of our facilities. We all know that maintaining facilities is expensive. Particularly, a lot of these historic facilities are even more expensive to maintain. So how are we smartly using these footprints in a way that supports our visitors as well as allows our staff to be safe and do their jobs well? What you're seeing here on the left is a very early schematic design for a rework of the Muirwoods entry area. Again, it looks at how do we make sure that visitors have a welcoming experience when they arrive, whether it's by car or by shuttle. How do they clearly get what they need to get to, the restrooms, the ticketing, the visitor center to ask questions? But do that in a way that really sets the stage for them to have a magical experience at Muirwoods and allows for a smarter physical footprint, so a much smaller footprint that will allow for extensive restoration, because again, folks are there to enjoy a park. And then on the right, you'll see a recently completed project we did at Roy's Redwoods for Marin County Parks and Open Space. Similar to the work that we're designing at Muirwoods, what we really wanted to look at highlighting was opportunities for extensive restoration with a really light visitor touch. So in developing an accessible boardwalk through this site, we're able to both really improve visitor access, visitor experience, visitor engagement in that site, while allowing for extensive floodplain restoration and protection of those redwood trees. And through simple features like signage and boardwalks, we really see our visitors having a great new experience at this place.
Great. So what we're thinking for this particular project is we would take a look at the Sky Oaks Ranger Station and just a little bit of history of that facility. That was originally a building from the 1920s. And it was actually used for a UC summer engineering camp originally. And then it got modified in the 1970s to become a ranger station. And it was a kind of, there used to be a fireplace in it, kind of imagine cabin-esque ranger station. And then in the mid 1990s, that was remodeled into its current form. And around that time, we added 2 modular buildings out in the back. So at Sky Oaks, we have about 4 work areas. We, have unique names for them. We call one the fish box, one the sky box, and then the main ranger station. In the main ranger station, rangers have their office space upstairs. Those 8 rangers share 3 workstations, which generally works, but has some limitations. Our watershed maintenance staff, predominantly field workers, but they do need facilities like a shop to do their work and prepare things for the watershed. We use 2 garage bays with limited, space and complexity for that workshop space. So not ideal, but something that's functioning. That's also where our maintenance staff have cubbies for all of their own personal gear and PPE. So we're kind of crammed into this little space. Our natural resource staff occupies what we call the sky box, which is one of the modular buildings out the back. We have kind of 4 permanent workstations there, and then we host our watershed aides and our Grizzly Corps members in that building as well. So kind of outgrowing some of the physical spaces that we have. And our fisheries, has our fish box in similar condition. We're also outgrowing it. You come through our Sky Oaks workstations, and pretty much every corner has a computer and workstation. And it's functioning as is. And then we have our main entrance into the building, which is our visitor welcoming space. And we issue parking passes, address, questions and issues that do come up. And then we also have a small kiosk at the entrance that our ranger trainees are staffing. So there's a lot of work happening, a lot of important work happening out of the Sky Oaks Ranger Station, and there could be some improvements that are needed and would benefit from this type of investment and evaluation to think about how we can better support staff in the field work that they do. One example of our fisheries staff is they, are assembling these pit tag antennas that they then take out into the field, and their workshop space is extremely limited. And similarly for our rangers, when they're putting together PPE or developing kind of trail cameras or signage, their space to do that is very limited at this point in time. So that's one component of the evaluation. The other one would be to assess our existing watershed housing infrastructure, and specifically looking at our Lake Lagunitas facility and asking the question of, does that serve the district as a ranger residence? Should it be something else? Is there another opportunity there? Our Sky Oaks residence is currently occupied by a ranger, but probably has the most opportunity to think about expansion. So if the district was interested in supporting kind of seasonal housing, which we've talked about with the Watershed Committee before, this might be a site that we would explore that type of facility in. And then there's also an Alpine residence, which is kind of defunct at this point, and we could evaluate, what's the best long-term plan for that as well. Our other residents are in really good shape and are, in good condition as they are. So the proposed scope of this facilities assessment and conceptual design would be for $200,000 that we would contract with the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy through our MOU with OneTAM to support the district in looking at our Sky Oaks Ranger Station, doing kind of a staff assessment of workstations and what needs we have, and start to envision what a modification could look like. And then do a similar effort for our Sky Oaks and main visitor areas. So, we have about 4 primary visitor locations. We could do some high level, analysis of how people are using those spaces and how they could be improved. But I think our thought is to focus on the Sky Oaks corridor and just ask the question of can kiosks be updated? How are we welcoming our visitors? Are there accessibility improvements we could be making? How are our restroom facilities? Things of that nature. And then look at our housing conditions and start to ask the question around seasonal housing, or do we want to modify some of these facilities in different ways? And as part of that, we'd be developing kind of a flexible portfolio of projects that could be advanced, and try to align that with kind of a fundraising strategy for how we might be able to implement elements of this overall concept. So I think our intention here is to take on a project that allows the district to have maximum flexibility in thinking about the future improvements that we could carry out in different ways, and to support not just visitors, but our staff, and then also in ways that we're protecting the resources on the mountain. So with that, we'll take any questions that you might have for us. And, the item is to review a grant from the Mount Tam Watershed Fund in the amount of $200,000, which requires board approval. So we'd be bringing this back to the April meeting for further discussion.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Claire. Matt, I know you have a lot of interest in the facilities. Do you want to start us off?
First off, Claire, I just want to say one, thank you for being here today. It highlights the continued partnership we have with the Conservancy in One Tam, but also have to throw a plug in. You guys did a hell of a job at Roy's Redwoods. It's really a really cool project. Highly recommend it for that. So, Sean, I think the approach you're taking on this is spot on. I think we look at it from a pretty holistic view of what we can potentially do on the watershed and then go into focusing on priorities. And I think starting the Sky Oaks corridor should be the priority. Your staff should be the priority. The facilities they need to do their job should be the priority. We're asking you more and more every day. And so not being able to support you the resources doesn't really make too much sense. So we need to make sure your team has what they need to do, and then we can build from there on that. But with that same build, I would recommend looking at what future development should look like. So are you going to need more people? Is there opportunity for future growth and build out? Are we going to find ourselves in the same situation we are in now in 30 years, as opposed to having a little bit more foresight on that? And when we look to prioritize projects, this is a little bit further down the road, but we start a conceptual design and see what could happen. When we look to prioritize, I recommend looking in ways we can complement other One Tam projects or conservancy things. Where is there another need for the region that we could help meet, and vice versa, and leverage those? And I think that again, will strengthen the partnership we have. You talked about seasonal workforce housing, which I could not support more. However, that could potentially be played out, but I think that kind of progress or project maybe would help with other conservancy projects, One Tam pieces. We're all sharing the same workforce, and if we can make that easier to be able to share, I think that's a really big win for this. I'm very excited about this. I think this is a really logical next step as we look to modernize the district. And if we have, we keep talking about our most precious asset as the watershed, we need to make sure we have the ability to maintain it and go forward. And I think this is a really good start to do that. And outside of that priority, now we look at some public amenities, and we have the opportunity to look at some educational pieces, which I think is really neat, because if we don't have the ability to truly educate in a space that makes sense. I mean, we're trying so hard right now with everything that's being done to put out there, whether it's self-guided tours or volunteer examples, or next Tuesday we'll be throwing trout in Bontempi with our daughter. But without a space to really coalesce around, we're missing an opportunity to teach the community writ large about how important what we have in the back is. So thank you very much for your effort. I very much look forward to a full board meeting.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Jed.
I like the cold call approach.
Hey, just trying to mix it
Yeah.
up here.
Reminds me of business school. Thanks again for the support. I think it's important for our customers and the public to realize how much effort this agency puts into the watershed, not just delivering water through our pipes and reservoirs to residents and customers, and the enormous investment and people power it takes to support 22,000 acres and the native plants and species, and then the staff to do that. So I appreciate this effort. I've long looked at Sky Oaks as an area for upgrades, and looking forward to two sides of it that are important to me. One is the efficiency and productivity of the staff, and the second is the potential for housing, which I think would be fantastic for our rangers and our folks. So looking forward to the next step after this project, and thanks for teaming with us.
Thanks, Jed. Larry?
You caught my attention. What visitor conservation effort? What does that mean? Use your words.
I think, my word. I think I'm in at the intersection of visitors and conservation, right? So a lot of that, I mean, maybe Roy's Redwoods is a great example of being able to do very thoughtful conservation work, being also able to expand visitor access and engagement through that, and then hopefully being able to inspire a love of those lands and further conservation through that visitor engagement.
Okay, thank you. Just to put things in perspective, you may not realize why these houses are there. As I recall, these are the old watershed keeper houses. So there were live-upon people on the watershed doing kind of the jobs the rangers do, but the watersheds were closed. So you didn't have all this influx of people. You had a guy who's basically, in Africa, they refer to the poachers as shoot on sight. I won't go quite that far, But that's kind of what they were there for, is to police the watershed, to keep people off of the watershed. So that's why we have these houses, because it's kind of weird if you think about it, right? We don't allow any building in the watershed except for these. So it's kind of an interesting aspect of what we have there. Thank you.
Diana?
I also wanted to say that I did a field trip to Roy's Redwoods and thought the work was awesome. How do people find out about the Mount Tamalpais Watershed Fund? Is there anything posted on the trails? I mean, I see the website, but
Yeah, so recently we put it on our trail maps. So there's a QR code that takes you to our volunteer opportunities, our Mount Tam Fund, and other watershed details. We're starting to roll that out on our kiosks as we update those. We put it on our bill insert. There's a reference to the Mount Tam Fund and how you can donate. And then our website is the other way.
sounds like you got it covered. Thanks.
Just, Sean, on the fund, so currently we have a little, about close to $800,000. Since 96, it looks like we've dispersed about 418,000. So this is a pretty big disbursement, given the history of the fund and the amount that we have available. It's going to drop it pretty substantially. Should we be thinking about a more aggressive strategy for setting a fund target or some, guidance on, how much we can allocate per year or, levels that we would like to maintain? Just thinking about whether we should be maybe doing more proactive, both fundraising as well as management. Because this, again, to repeat, this will be a pretty big hit on the fund.
Yeah, I will speak to 2 points and ask Molly to speak to the kind of structure of the foundation. Foundations are meant to support something with a purpose. And so you want to be using those funds in some way. The district probably hasn't used it as frequently as we could be using it to support watershed projects. We've been very careful on how we used it in the past. This is the highest fund balance I think the fund has ever had. So I think it makes sense to use a portion of it now for this type of project. And then with regards to fundraising, absolutely, I think this is going to be something that we think about as we develop this facilities and assessment and conceptual design and think about fundraising for the various options. We'll be kind of teasing out how we can, connect people to this foundation and this donation opportunity. And then Molly, do you want to speak to the kind of framework for the foundation and how that's set up for the board?
Sure. So we have an agreement with the Marin Community Foundation, and their purpose is just to facilitate for the district this fund as a 501c3 nonprofit. So it's a charitable donation, and the agreement is identifies the purpose of the watershed. Fairly broad. I think, as Sean was saying, in the development of this concept plan, fundraising and these types of foundation funds, for lack of a better word, accounts, I think they tend to grow when there's something to point to. This was, I think, was set up initially just to have a place where we could have people who want to donate, who want to invest in our watershed in a way that's different from what paying their water bill, for example, or visiting the park or the watershed. And so it does give that opportunity, but if we don't continue to feed it and kind of, utilize it, it's intended to be utilized. It can be expended. It is an advisory recommendation from the board, but I think that the foundation very much wants to support the activities that the board decides are appropriate for the watershed. So I think it's kind of an effort to continue the awareness of the fund by having those kind of priorities and specific uses identified. So people tend to want to know, what am I putting my money into this fund to support? And by developing a concept plan, I think the idea is that it would actually help with potential fundraising. Hopefully that answers the question.
Molly, so follow up, do we have policy around how that fund is managed or spent?
There's not specific policy that's been developed by the board. I mean, the board has full discretion to determine what's appropriate for utilization of the funds and in making an advisory approval that then goes to the foundation, the community foundation. The community foundation then evaluates and makes sure that it's consistent with the agreement that was put in place. As I said, that the language in there is from 1996 is fairly broad, and I think there's never really been a question about, you know, the district board being the appropriate uh, advisory body to kind of direct the use of the fund. So I think it's yeah, it's really to serve the watershed is the focus.
I have a question. I remember prior to your time, we had a fairly extensive discussion about having a checkbox or something on the bill. I think that's before your time. And that for some reason couldn't be done with the bill modification or something. I'm particularly thinking of the people who pay online, because I would contribute to that if I had the ability to do that easily. But as I recall, we don't.
So we definitely currently have a checkbox on the paper bill.
The hard bill.
The hard
yeah.
bill, and we will have that going forward. As you know, we're in the process of changing our billing system. So online, I can double check on that. I know we have the ability through our website to make donations, but I'm not sure when you're there paying your bill if it's as straightforward. But with the new platform we have for payment systems should give us a lot more ability to embed links as you're paying, as opposed to 2 or 3 steps beforehand. So we can definitely design that as part of a kind of a redirect as you're paying your bill.
That'd be great.
To make it more seamless.
And the other thing is, it seems to me, this individual who's contributed 90% plus, we might consider a bench if they're interested in that.
Or like a pen, maybe. We've it's from a trust. We've reached out thanking them every year and offering them, you know, a watershed tour if they'd like, and we've never heard back.
Okay.
Sean, I would recommend that, you know, given our grants team and the capacities there, we do consider maybe more proactive efforts around this fund, including setting some targets. Generally, without a target, it's hard to make substantial progress. And yeah, I mean, you know, a campaign, there's so much that I think could be done given if we have the capacities to do it. So maybe looking at that, seeing what's feasible beyond what's already being done, and setting some goals would be a good next step. I think, Claire, just one, you know, it's really encouraging to see the work that the Conservancy has done at Muir Woods and with Roy's Redwoods. Could you just talk a little bit about the capacities at the Conservancy for these types of assessments so that we all understand sort of what, you know, who does the work, what's available there?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. I mean, in the broadest strokes, the Conservancy has a staff of just over 300 folks. I roughly think of those as about 100, you know, sit at headquarters and make sure that we've met payroll and their computers are running. About 100 are very visitor facing. So they are the folks that hand you a headset on Alcatraz or sell you a book at the warming hut at Chrissy Field. And then about 100 work to deliver projects and programs in support of our parks. So that's the part of the organization I work in. My team is about 30 staff with a head count of 8 to 10 in our park projects office. And that's a mix of planners, landscape architects, ecologists, et cetera, that work on these types of projects. We typically are running anywhere from 12 to 20 different projects across our different agency partners at any given time. And then we also work very closely with our development team. So, right, part of what the Parks Conservancy does is help to develop a community of supporters for our parks, whether it's through our membership programs, through our individual giving programs, through foundation and government grants programs. So that's the other side of what we do, is not just develop great ideas, but make sure that they're feasible in terms of what might be the funding sources that allows them to advance, and to be very strategic when we undertake efforts like this, to make sure that you can have those kind of both low-hanging fruit that you can get done and be able to point to Molly's point, as well as more visionary things that do encourage folks to stay more engaged and maybe give it bigger levels. So we do really want to make sure that we're encouraging investment in these projects as well as smart development of them.
Great. I think that's helpful for everybody to understand the capacities there. the rationale behind this partnership. I hope when you do provide the assessments, you do give sort of the ranking of what you think is going to be those low hanging fruit and what may take, more ambition to achieve. Good. Terry, do you have any public comments?
Yes, we have a couple, Larry Minikis and Nona Dennis.
Yeah, a little history is in order here. So back in 1996, maybe even earlier than that, Jack Gibson actually was the person that brought this idea forward with Pam Nicolai, who was the general manager at the time. And I had the honor of being the treasurer of that. And we had 2 environmentalists on it, and I think about 5 folks that were there specifically to fundraise. And as you know, the history is it evolved into one TAM. One of the discussions we were having back then is about an education center. And I know that as a small water district, we're limited in what we could do. This segues back to what I said earlier about education. This is an incredible opportunity, if we could, to create something where we could bring kids in who can learn about these fields, because we need to get more people into these fields. And this really gives them an opportunity to see how a water district operates and the kind of people that are needed on it and the passions that the people that are working here have. So if at all in this thinking, we can think about an expanded educational opportunity, that would be fantastic. And the housing, we've been talking about housing, improving housing and improving this really since the 90s. This is very much like Pine Mountain. It's been an ongoing conversation. It's exciting to see it brought forward, and I hope it does come to fruition. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Dennis, please.
Yes, thank you. I certainly agree with Larry, my colleague from Marine Conservation League. Let me give you 2 perspectives. One is from MCL. One is as a personal, what should we say, a personal resident who has a long list of organizations to support in a modest way. I look at the list annually, and there it is. The MCL perspective really goes to the projects that we have followed over the past, what should we say, 25 years, starting with an earlier visitor education facility near Lake Lagunitas, which we found to be, at that point, really out of scale. It was really quite vast. We spent many, many hours on the log cabin, which was brought forward as a wonderful idea. There were some concerns, public access and so forth, making it ADA. So the log cabin came and went after many, many hours of engagement. The next one was West Peak. Again, a really exciting project and one that seemed to have a real following, a totally different part of the watershed, different watershed actually. And so the West Peak came and went. So we're always a little, what should we say, a little skeptical when new projects come forward that are going to go through a lengthy review process. So I suggest, from the standpoint of your various advocates who do advocate on your behalf, you should be, I'm sure you're aware of that, you should be give a lot of thought at the conceptual phase as to what you really want to promote, what's really important, because MCL, not I, but others, will be there watching, critiquing in a constructive way, and certainly supporting you and your decisions, but it takes time for volunteers, huge amount of time for volunteers to do that. The other is the Watershed Fund. And let me point out that MCL and others were very much involved in the early stages. What could the water district do with the fund? It was not enough, so they went to a partnership. That is history, a partnership with one TAM, and that brought, for those of us who modestly support conservation efforts, it added 2 more entities to our list of discretionary dollars going to donations to conservation efforts. It added first the Conservancy, and it added to my list, added the Conservancy, and it added one TAM, who I knew eventually would also want members. Now you're considering adding the watershed and promoting it as another way for us to spend our donation dollars. Think carefully before you do that.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Appreciate your comment, Ms. Dennis. There are no further speakers.
Okay, then I think we're done for
Quick,
today.
quick comment.
Yeah, Larry.
The log cabin, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the log cabin or not. Nona hit on part of it. As I recall, there's a bark beetle infestation. I presume it's still there. That made it unfeasible to do anything with the log cabin. We talked about making it into a visitor center, educational center, and tried to restore the building, but the cost of restoration was horrendous. I think we spent 200,000 or something like that on just keeping it from falling down. So that's a resource that's there, has potential, but it's pretty tricky because of this bark beetle. It's actually made out of logs. So, and the beetle's in the bark between the wood and the what you see on the outside. It's one of those things where, you know, you start off, it sounds like a great idea until you get the next step. And then they come back and say, well, yeah, you could do this, but. Oh, and one more question. I assume on the West Peak, we're talking with our friends from the Native American groups. I remember a presentation that we had. It's a sacred site for I think it's the Miwoks, that one of the individuals got up and it rose to like Shaheen Little Feathers and those types of people at one point. So it's got a lot of impact. They weren't pleased with what the military did when they came in and wiped out the middle peak. They pushed the middle peak over the hill down the side and flattened it to make room for the radome and those type of things, and the Marin Air Force Base that was up there. So we were pretty heavy-handed at that point on the Native American viewpoint, and they were pretty vocal, as I recall, in this. I think we actually had a shaman come in and show a film that was Peter Coyote was the narrator, as I recall, of the film. So there's a lot of history here that I don't know if you've even been to the West Peak, but it's interesting to look. You know, there was a officers club, bowling alley. Yeah, pretty fancy. And they just basically walked away. Fortunately, Feinstein got them to kick in a few million to help us clean it up because it had mercury in many locations from handling liquid mercury. So I don't know, I guess we just kind of stopped on that.
We're not looking at the log cabin or West Peak for this project,
We're not
right?
looking at the log cabin. The West Peak is in the conceptual design. There's various components that, you know, could be picked up at any point. It was really a restorative project looking at how you can improve serpentine habitat and improve public access up there. This wouldn't touch that project at this point.
No, of course not. No, I was just trying again to educate a little bit. There's a lot of water under the bridge in these things.
Always good to have the history as we continue to push forward. Thanks a lot, Sean. Thanks a lot, Carrie, for the great presentation. I think that's it then with the regular agenda. We'll move to item 5, which is upcoming meetings.
Yes, the next Watershed Committee meeting will take place on June 12th at 9:30.
Thank you, Terry. And with that, I will adjourn our Watershed Committee and Special Board meeting of March 20th, 2025.
Thank you.
The ballot.